Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Hey, it's me, Colin. I'm just here to introduce this video just in case you didn't read the description, as I know so many of you are very lazy indeed. This is actually 2 episodes that I decided to stitch together based on the inspiration we received from the episode of Sacred Symbols Plus that Cog and I did called Health is Wealth about a month ago. You guys really loved that episode. I was surprised by that because I was afraid it was going to come off as preachy and maybe not really relevant to a lot of you, but it was surprisingly relevant and I think inspirational. So what I did here was a couple people had approached me after that to want to talk on the show. One is a professional in the bodily health space. One is a professional in the mind health space. I spoke to them both individually. We stitched it together here. You will find those first with body, then with mind. I hope you enjoy it. Au revoir. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Walt Chambers, founder, lead designer, and master wizard, it says in his email signature, of InfitniteRPG.
Hello.
.com. Welcome, by the way, to the show. I'm really interested to talk to you, Walt. This idea you have going on is pretty cool. So welcome. I'm glad to have you here to talk about it today.
Oh, pleasure to be here, Colin. And I'm so excited to chat with the LSM audience and really dive into something that changed my life and has changed many gamers' lives.
Awesome. Just so people out there know, we are dealing with a little bit of latency. So you might notice that more like cable TV news latency, and you'll see what I'm saying just in case we restarted. We have no idea what the problem is. Dustin's in Japan, so I'm flying blind here right now. So just in case anyone notices that, I'm sorry about that. But all right. So Walt, you reached out to me based on the conversation I had with Cog. Mm-hmm. It's funny that conversation with Cog, and I did another episode about mental well-being based on that. I might actually stitch these 2 podcasts together and call them Body and Mind, mm-hmm. and have people get into those different things. And it was surprising to me that people received that podcast so well. It was very surprising. I thought that people would look at it as being, I don't know, not judgy, but preachy maybe, or something like that. So mm-hmm. what drew you in from that conversation?
Yeah. So I've been part of the LSM and listening to you guys for, but think about 2 years now. I found you guys and never stopped ever since. Been listening to Cog, been listening to Maddie, been listening to you. And once you guys dropped that Health is Wealth podcast, something spoke to me as someone who's been in the fitness industry for over a decade, someone who's been a gamer for over 25 years. Just hearing health and fitness being talked about on a gaming podcast for me was everything that I've ever wanted in life. I love health. I love fitness. I love transforming lives. And when I heard you guys talk about, the struggles you guys went through, the journey you guys went through on your health and fitness, something just struck me and grabbed me. And all I did was just take out a pen and a piece of paper and just start writing notes about, what you guys been through, because this is literally what I do for a living. Is I help gamers transform their lives. And to hear that from you guys, and which is why I reached out. I was like, hey, like, Colin, I did this assessment for you. Like, I just listened to everything that you shared and here's what I found. And that's what struck me to be like, hey, I want to reach out and I want to see if there's an opportunity to kind of dive deeper into the topic and see if we can really have a deeper conversation, one that can really guide the listeners and guide gamers down a better path.
Yeah, well said. By the way, is your necklace a Buster sword? Is that what that is?
It sure is.
Nice. Very cool. People aren't watching on video. It's very nice. At first I looked like one of those dangling like diamond, or not diamond, but a crystal that people wear or whatever. Especially in the 80s, people used to wear those. But then as more I started out, I'm like, that's not what that is at all. All right. So, Walt, I want to get a little bit into your background, where you're from, who you are. So tell us a little bit about your past. How old are you? Where do you live? I want to know the essentials here.
Yeah. So I'm 31 years old, currently located in Kirkland, Washington, right next to all the big tech companies. Originally from Jackson, New Jersey. So I'm a East Coast guy, just like Lord Cog. Had the somewhat of a same vibe. Military background as far as my family goes. My father was a former Air Force major, and ironically, I was born in Okinawa, Japan. So while Dustin
Nice.
is hanging out in Japan, I'm actually highly jealous. Uh, I wish I could be
Were
there.
you there? Were you there when you were cognizant, or was that just when you were like an infant?
I was an infant, man. I have this one vague memory of seeing a dragon. We went to like a festival, and that's like my first memory. Is like I just an image of a dragon, which,
That's cool.
as you can see in the background, it's actually part of our symbol for infinite. Um, but yeah, so basically, I moved over to Washington, and growing up in New Jersey, I was a gamer since I was 3 years old. I just started with the NES, Mario, and Duck Hunt were my foundation, and I just fell in love with gaming ever since. I just couldn't beat the first level of Mario as a kid, and it pissed me off. And then it's like I just kept trying again and again and again and again, and then I beat it. And then there you go. That's it. Next
Yeah,
level, level two.
it's an addiction for sure, and we'll get into that in a little bit with what you're
Yeah,
doing with infinite. How do you say it, by the way? It's infitnite. How do you say it? Because I'm just calling it infinite, but I don't know if it's
infinite.
if
You
that's
got it.
right. Infinite. Okay, cool.
Silent T.
Fine, silence. Yeah, it's. I saw you have that registered, which is awesome. That no one else ever thought of that. I
Right.
always surprised by that. When I got Last Stand, I was like, I mean, there are a bunch of trademarks for Last Stand, but not in like the media world. So I was like, that's kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your education and whatever, because you have
Mhm.
4 acronyms next to your name that I don't know what any of these mean. So one of them says PPSC, and then it's an asterisk and an M. What does that mean?
So I'm a master pain-free performance specialist. Basically, in other words, I'm an injury and longevity specialist. So I studied under one of my mentors, Dr. John Russin, who is a prolific uh, person in the fitness industry who's trained on the Olympic level, and he's transformed how I approached fitness and training in general, simply because of the longevity component, which is something that most people aren't thinking about, right? When they go on their health and fitness journey, it's you kind of have that early 20s teens type of resiliency where you could just kind of do anything you want. But then once you start to get older, right, late 20s, early 30s, going on so forth, you have to kind of approach fitness and health in a different way. So that's one thing that I am. But I started off as a strength and conditioning specialist, going all the way back into 2012. My fitness background was in football. So really trying to kind of focus on the big compound lifts, really focusing on explosive plyometric work and things like that.
What did you play?
So I was a pass rushing D end. So I had the speed, but I didn't have the size. So I would just come in and blitz the quarterback. But then I also would play tight end as well because I could generate the speed and the force to really just like knock the linebackers or even the cornerbacks off their ass. So
So like a blocking tight end.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I was gonna say you struck me as I was gonna say safety, just based on
Oh.
so close, and edge rusher is a little bigger, obviously. Um,
Mhm.
and then what does NSCA-CPT? What does that mean?
National Strength and Conditioning Association certified personal trainer,
Wow. And then CCC,
certified conditioning coach,
and then MPM.
mental performance mastery coach.
Wow. This is so you have a lot of education in these various things. Very cool.
Yeah, ever since I was 14 years old, getting into health and fitness every single day, I studied health and fitness. I learned something, even on my birthday. Like it's just a daily habit that I just built over the years.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Biology and all things like human existence, they don't I don't know enough about any of these sorts of things. They just never have intrigued me. I've kind of just run blind on those. So it's cool to have
Yeah.
your expertise here. So talk to me a little bit. You grew up in New Jersey, not too far from where I grew up, of course, too. And so you're in that tri-state area. You move out to Washington specifically because that's where tech is. Is that an accurate thing, or did you have a team there that you wanted to work with or something?
No. So my family is actually originally we're from Kent, Washington, and
Oh, okay.
I was the only one out in New Jersey area. I have family in down south and also in Panama. My mother's from Panama, but then everyone else is in Washington. So I graduated college and was like, all right, like let's start a new life in Washington. So that's what got me here.
Nice. I also left the East Coast after college, so I totally get it. So let's get into this Infinite RPG. I'm fascinated by this. I poked around the website quite a bit, and this is pretty heady and interesting stuff, and a good idea. And basically, what I would consider the definition of gamification, which is which for some people is good or some people bad, but I think is so naturally good. I often bring up just the very simple thing of I don't think anyone uses it anymore, but back when Foursquare came out, the app Foursquare, I don't know if you remember that, but it was during the early for people that don't know, during the early smartphone era, and it probably still exists in some way, but basically all you would do was go places, and when you went there, you would check in.
Yep.
And then you would get like badges, and you become the mayor of a place if you're there more than anyone else, and people would cheat and try to do all these things to game it. And it was really fun. And I played that game for quite a bit. Yeah. And it made me realize, along with trophies and other things, that the meta gamification of things that we do every day is very wise. And I think would be very alluring to many people, whether it's, I almost look at like school as gamification in some way. You're getting grades, everything's weighted a certain way. You have this GPA and this array of scores and grades. So it seems like if you open your mind to it, we're kind of gamified in many ways, even if it's not necessarily, it's meant to track and not to have fun. So what made you think that this was a good idea? Because I think it's a wonderful idea. It's almost surprising that you don't see more of this. And actually, in the other conversation I did about Mind, we talked a little bit about Ring Fit Adventure, which on Switch, which is what I would think would be the closest we've gotten in the mainstream to gamifying health, probably, maybe with the exception of Wii Fit back 10 or 12 years ago. But
yeah, that and Pokemon Go too was
Pokemon Go is a great one too, and that fucked everyone up during during COVID because they could no longer travel, and they started people have started realizing they could spoof all this stuff, and so they just didn't even need to leave it all, and
attaching it to like their fan.
Yeah, exactly. It's hysterical, which is great. So we see this over time, and I love that. And I've said before, as a young sport, I played hockey my entire childhood and into my teen years. One of my favorite things was keeping my own stats. Like I was a goalie. So often in youth hockey, they don't have to do this, but they usually do it for fun. They usually on the score sheet will have hashes for all the shots on net, and they would never really count them up, but I would go and get them and then count them and keep them. I actually found my book recently from like 7th grade. Ooh. So I have like all my statistics and everything for all my games, and it's hysterical looking through them. So I understand this intrinsically, and I want to know where this idea came from and what made you want to get it off the ground. I have as an entrepreneur too, I have a lot of questions for you as far as your series funding, if you ever had any, and how you even got this. Because this is a thing. This isn't something, I guess what I'm saying is it's cool. It's like at Last Stand. This is a thing. It's not a hypothetical. Yes. So clearly you've gotten this far along. So talk to me a little bit about this.
Oh yeah. So right off the bat, I believe life is the greatest RPG. Plain and simple. I tried to gamify my life and failed over and over and over again. And what I would do is I would escape to video games. I would rather be in the virtual world than the real world for a majority of my life, where I failed so many times in my life, other than academically, because my dad, it's actually kind of funny. So here's how I first started to discover gamifying life and things like that. So as a kid, going in the 1st grade, my dad said, if you can get straight A's, I'll give you $20, like bi-weekly. And as a kid, $20 is like $20,000, right?
Oh yeah. I would let that burn a hole in my pot. That would be gone. Yeah, I'd go buy a toy with it or something. Yeah.
But the big thing is, the one thing I only wanted was games. That's it. All I wanted to do was get a new game. Every birthday, every celebration was game, game, game. So what I did was I was like, how do I get straight A's? He's like, you have to listen to the teacher, you have to do your homework, and you have to score high enough on the tests. Can you start to see all these kind of stats now? Right. I'm just like, oh, okay. So when I would go to school, I would do exactly that. And lo and behold, once I got that first A, it's like, I think I kind of figured out the formula. Then I got another one and another one and another one. And I started getting these 20 bucks, 20 bucks. Next thing you know, I started to get that new shiny game. Big thing is the reward loop was
Mm.
constantly getting fed. Is I was doing a systematic action in school that would get me an end reward. And that's when I kind of figured out it's like, holy shit, I've been doing this in games. And this is when I first started to create this connection as a kid on how I could kind of gamify real life things. So, of course, once I started to expand out of my comfort zone, going into somewhat like sports and things like that, that's when other variables started to come into play, right? Like physicality, knowledge is of the sport, and um, all these other factors, which of course added complexity, right? And when games get too complex, what happens to your motivation? Goes down. And that's what would happen over and over and over again. I would get into basketball, but I was eventually getting out of shape. I couldn't keep up my cardiovascular, and I would get tired, and I would try to shoot the ball and I airball it, right? Like that would make you feel bad. And eventually you're like, I don't want to play this anymore. But I'd say the next step on how I discovered this was through martial arts.
Mm.
Um, when I got into martial arts, they had a belt system, right? I got into Taekwondo. Taekwondo for me was just something about it. But once I saw the ranking system of going from white belt, yellow belt, blue belt, purple belt, and all these different things, I was like, I want to get to the final level, the black belt. So I started to gamify that where it's like every milestone I was getting through, each belt was kind of showing me, was motivating me to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I got all the way to black belt. And this was my first experience where I approached it from a game like mindset, and I actually was successful other than education. So that was a big awakening for me as well. But I'd say the life changing moment for me when it comes to getting to this point of kind of coming up with the idea of infinite was I just kept asking myself this question of how can we turn reality, turn fitness, turn health into a game? What would that be like? What would that journey be like? And what would be the reward be for the people who approached it from this mindset? And I just pondered this question over and over and over and over again. And it got to the point where it just became who I was, if that makes sense. Like I started to think about everything from a game like mindset, beyond education, beyond sports. I started to look at relationships, right? Communication, all these different variables in that. I started to look at, finances, right? I started to look at career development. I started to look at nutrition, right? You could break down kind of each one of these things to kind of smaller components, smaller variables. And when you do that, you start to kind of see what you've always been seeing as a gamer, which game development for me, once I started to get into that, that's when I was like, oh my God. Like all you see is the imagery and the gameplay, right? But you don't see like how that's being created. You don't see the numbers. You don't see the coding. You don't see the variables. But when you really break down all these games, that's really all it is. And then you start to see like, oh my God, reality. All these things in here is kind of almost similar. Like, oh my God, and over the years, I've been coaching for over a decade professionally. I built that into my training systems. I built that into my nutrition systems. I built that into even my mindset development as well. And that is actually how I've always been coaching, is from a game like mindset, because games are fun. That's what they're meant to be, right? And most people look at health, nutrition, fitness as this impossible, strenuous, arduous type of like thing that's not fun. But I've always tried to make it fun. But what really turned it over, this is the changing point, was COVID. When COVID happened, I think everybody looked in the mirror and was like, holy shit, what do I do? Right? Even myself, I was a master trainer at 24 Hour Fitness at the time, and I lost my job. Gyms were closed down. How do I help people? How do I do anything? Right? Like, we all had to kind of take that reflection and step back. And I never forget this. It was December 2020. I'm with my parents, um, and my girlfriend, who's now my fiance.
Oh, congratulations.
And thank you. And I just remember just taking out a notebook and just taking out a pen, and I said, this year I want to create something no one's ever created before. I want to approach this year and leave everything that I've ever done before in my life and just culminated it all into something incredible. And I started off by writing down 4 things. And it was the 4 goals that I was helping people at the time: fat loss, muscle building, glute building. I was helping a lot of ladies at the time building some glutes, and then marathon running. And I just wrote these 3 things. It's like, okay, these are things that I'm helping people currently. Then I started to connect them to RPG type class systems. So I was like, muscle building, what is that like? You know, it's kind of like a barbarian. I'm like, oh yeah, they're muscular, fierce, strong, powerful. Oh, okay. Then I started to look at glute building. Well, glute building is kind of like a little bit of like a goddess, elf, like elegant, you know? Okay. Then marathon running, I was like, well, this is kind of like an Olympian, they like running is in the Olympics. Like, Then of course there's also power as well, right? There's power lifters and things like that. And that's when I started to expand. I'm like, that's kind of like an orc. These powerful creatures that can, move the earth and destroy anything in their path. That's what really started it, is really starting to create these distinctions between health and fitness and a lot of these RPG mechanics.
It's interesting because have you've invested in this idea of game design, which I think most people in games understands is the secret sauce of video games. And the most difficult discipline in games is to be the designer of the game. I'm not saying it's easy to make graphics or to program things or to work on engines and all that. All that's difficult, but the actual foundation of the game is the most important thing. And that's somewhat like, I always give credit to Barry at the studio I own, Lilymo, because he designs everything. And I'm like, that's so easy. It's easy for me to walk in here and look at what you have and then be like, oh, I can write a story about this. But it comes from his brain. So I give you a lot of credit for that. And I think that that's really, really wise.
Thank you.
It's strange to me, as I said earlier, that it's not that fitness hasn't crossed over more into gaming. Although I think it's very similar to sports and gaming. And I lament this all the time as a huge sports fan, and sounds like you are as well, where I feel like they go together very well, like peanut butter and jelly. I don't think that people in both camps, or that majorities of people in both camps, get that really. The sports ball stuff you'd get from gamers, and in sport, the kind of eye rolling at nerddom. But I'm like, a lot of that is really, especially the obsession over statistics. And I've said that the greatest turn-based game in the world is football, other than chess, of course.
I was about
football.
to say,
I love, football. I love it.
Love it.
and I'm trying not to. It's funny, man. You're the first person I'm basically talking to since Aaron Rodgers blew out his Achilles, which
Wow.
I almost just people. I'm sure people are gonna be curious about this. So I'll just put it in here. Is that I thought I was gonna cry last night, like when I because this has all been leading to this moment, and
Mm-hmm.
he runs out with the American flag like Captain America,
Oh man.
and I'm like, this is I've been to many Jets games, and like I don't think I've ever heard it that loud in my entire life and my
Ever.
existence there. I wish I was at that game for a minute. Um, and so I look at all of these different things, and I'm like, there's so much continuity and collective thought between these entities. They go together.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you brought up about Taekwondo as well, because I was a little kid, but I took Taekwondo for like a year and a half and I wasn't very good. I ended up getting, but I know exactly what you're talking about in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that when I got my yellow tip on my white
Mm,
belt, I remember that really well. I was in third grade. I remember it like it was yesterday, just because I was like, yes, like this is awesome. And I don't know where that belt went, but these things all do loop together. And I completely
mm-hmm.
agree. It goes back to early wargaming and adults doing train sets in their basement
Yeah.
and dealing with moving pieces around, which becomes Warhammer and stuff like that much later on. It was always there.
Mm-hmm.
People have just now recently really begun to glean onto it. So I love that it's kind of surprising that this hasn't happened
Right.
already in some sense. It's a great idea. So, all right. So talk to me about, so again, I want to compliment you for real. Game design is very difficult. Giving something someone to do is hard. I don't know where to begin with a lot of that stuff. I know good game design when I see it though. So talk to me about getting this thing off the ground. I want to know more about the process as a game dev and an entrepreneur. I'm especially curious about the systems you used and how or if you raised money and who works for you and
Yeah.
what stakeholders you might deal with. I mean, I have a lot of questions here in this regard. This might be the more boring part for people, but for me, this is like the really
Oh,
interesting stuff. So
oh
yeah, I'd love
yeah.
to hear about it.
I'm excited to share, and we're definitely going to be getting into the nitty gritty. So stay tuned, everybody. We're going to really drop some empowering information that's going to elevate your fitness game for sure. Um, so getting out of the conceptual stage was the hardest. Like it was just a whole lot of ideas, right? And I couldn't put it all together. So what really kind of started that process was, all right, I created a class system, right, based on training style. But I had to really get deeper. Like, what is going to be the foundational principle for everything that we do here? And that's when I created what we call is the warrior attribute system. And the warrior is actually at the center, and that's the player, the gamer. And I said, what is going to be the key attributes for every warrior at Infinite? And that's three things. Number one, combat, the physicality, the physical aspect of health and fitness. Number two, intellect, the mental aspect of health and fitness. And number three, alchemy, the nutritional aspect of health and fitness. And when you combine all three of these things, you get health, you get growth, and you get sustainability. And you can't have one without the other. This is what I learned in my experience is so many fitness programs, so many fitness trainers, so many fitness coaches only focus on one aspect, either nutrition, and then it's like, the training's on the side. Or they go all in on training and they're like, yeah, here's some guidelines for nutrition. But there's rarely anyone that actually coaches and trains and makes programs for mindset. Why is that so low on the totem pole when it comes to health, fitness, and just overall mental health, right? Like, and this is the one aspect that, in my opinion, is truly the most important attribute because you could have the best training, you can have the best nutrition, but if you can't follow through on that consistently and have the discipline and even the motivation and the self-awareness and all these other skill sets, because all of these are skill sets that can be improved, everything else breaks down. So once I got that foundation, our core values together, it was just expanding from that point. And all it was essentially seamlessly integrating it to my current training programs, my current nutrition programs, my current mental programs. And I have to say, it was a massive shock. Like my audience that I built up at the time 12K on Instagram. It was a shock. Like my audience was not full of gamers, and people were just couldn't grasp the concept. They're like, why am I now an orc? Like, what's going on? Like, so that there was a learning curve before we officially launched in August of 2021, where we had to really start to figure out our messaging and our marketing and really get our core values down as to who we are and what we create. And it came down to this, Colin. We want to transform the bodies of gamers. We want to unlock their minds. We want to unleash the warrior within them. And we want to give them infinite health, infinite growth, and infinite achievement in their life. Because when you have all of this and you fuel that with mentorship, you fuel that with community, and you fuel that with support and accountability, you create a life that you thrive in. You become the hero. Because I feel like there's so many people who aren't stepping into that power of being the main character, the main protagonist that you've always been in games, but in your reality. So once we got that down and we put ourselves out there and we called ourselves Infitnite, we just had this ripple effect. I can't describe it. People would just reach out to us out of the blue and be like, what you guys are doing is incredible. Like, I want to learn more. And it started with the first person that we helped under Infitnite. And I can't even describe how incredible it felt. Because like you introduce these gaming concepts to gamers and they look at it and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it's like one person drops 30 pounds. One person quits alcohol. One person now has control over their nutrition and is no longer feeling sad about eating carbs or binge eating or anything like that because they now know how to bounce back and continue to make progress. The things that I've seen, Colin, have been incredible. And it just exacerbated once we started to really put these gaming mechanics in, like our class system, level system, skill system, and all these different things. And over time, it just grew and grew and grew. And we're completely organic. We reinvested all of our earnings back into optimizing our systems. So everything we make goes straight back in.
That's what any good entrepreneur would do. So I'm happy to hear that, as you're getting up, it's good to not like take early gains. I haven't taken money from Lilymo in years, for instance, all that goes into the next game,
Smart.
Now I get to do that from the advantage of having a very successful media company. But the point is that we don't take off the top. It's just all back in, all back in, all back in.
Mm-hmm.
And because we want the next big hit, or like we'll know. We always say we'll know it when it's time to steal from the treasure chest. But now is not.
Yeah.
Now is not the time. Let me ask you this. This is something that came to me, which I'm curious about. I didn't think I was going to ask you about this, but you had mentioned that the people you had brought up or gathered on Instagram, places like that, based on your normal fitness and nutrition and coaching or whatever you do or whatever you were doing, that these guys didn't understand, or many of them didn't understand the video game aspect of what you were trying to do. Two things I want to know about this is, were you able to, what is your rate of getting these guys to understand? Like the let's talk about like the basic gym bro who doesn't get games. Like, and the second thing I want to know is this is something I think would be interesting. Like, is there like a bare bones version of this for the people that are like, where you can just say to this dude, right? The gym bro doesn't give a fuck about the warriors and the orcs and shit. And you just say to him, like, listen, I just have the spread, like the data and the spreadsheets are just here. Like, just here you go.
Hmm.
You don't need to play the game, but this is the game. These are the dice rolls. These are the tables and all of the rest.
Yep.
Is there something for them too? Because you could probably demystify it for them and then be like, here's just the data. They'd probably really love that. They're probably measuring the amount of protein they take every day. They're probably
Hmm.
measuring, they're very carefully counting their reps and all that. So this is like, okay, just more numbers and grids. Is there something for them too?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So we have a data-driven science-backed approach. So that's the foundation of everything, right? Like if you just break it down on that fundamental level, that's basically what we're doing, and then everything else is just driven by the gamification aspects. But it's funny you mentioned that because recently I worked with a power lifter. His name is Jaquise, and we did that same exact thing. I was like, hey, as a powerlifter, which if you don't know, powerlifters have a terrible diet. Their diet is eat as much as you possibly can and get as strong as you can. And that's detrimental to their health. They have a lot of excess body fat, and it's the affects so many other factors. So I had this same exact conversation. I was like, hey, I created this this thing for gamers, but at the same time, it's like, have you thought about trying to gamify your nutrition? And he's like, no, I never really thought about that. All I did was give him my skill system. I was like, hey, here are 8 skills that you can develop. Here, they're driven by quests, right? Step by step objectives for you to complete. Things like carbohydrates, right? Fats, protein, sleep, water, meal tracking. Like all these things are skills, right? It's like, hey, I literally give you the blueprint. Here you go, right? I'm here to support you. I'm here to guide you. Then we could get really analytical as far as how your progress is going. We can make adjustments. In 16 weeks, he went from 220 pounds to 242 pounds. He competed in his powerlifting competition, took first place, broke records, and is now the strongest person at 242 pounds in the state of Washington in 16 weeks. And the craziest part is he maintained 16% body fat. So you could see his abs, you could see this musculature, and all of it was just through using our systems. I was like, here's our skill system. And he's not a gamer. He doesn't have that connection to RPGs and, games like Skyrim, games like Elden Ring, games like Dragon Age, World of Warcraft. I back in the day, I played a game called Neverwinter Nights. Loved that on
Yeah.
PC. Loved it. Oh, so good.
Neverwinter Nights, is that BioWare? Right? They
Yeah,
did that, I think, right? Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah, and he doesn't know anything about that, but he was able to take all these systems and these processes and just apply them to fitness and nutrition in just a different way, and that's what made it fun for him because it was different. He opened his mind to something different, and it's that conversion rate, like you were asking, is you know, you'd be surprised how many people aren't open-minded, right? If something is too far off of their basic understanding of what else is out there, it's like they're almost like it's like increased risk in their mind, right? Because it's like it hasn't technically been proven amongst the masses. For example, going to a fitness influencer with 500,000 followers, right? It's like, oh, this person's super popular. I'm going to buy their program because there's 500,000 people that follow him. And he must be trustworthy, right? But the thing is, it's like when you create something new, a new concept, you have to almost show everyone, you have to teach them, you have to build that trust, you have to build the confidence to know that, like, hey, I want to challenge myself in a different way and this works, and I'm willing to step out of my comfort zone. So for us, that has kind of been the biggest challenge outside of gamers, because as a gamer, I could just show you, like, hey, here are all hey, what's your favorite RPG? All right, cool, that's actually implemented, check it out. Have you been
Yeah.
implementing this in your health and fitness? No? Well, here you go.
Yeah, this is cool because I mean, I think you, as an entrepreneur, you have a choice, which is you either go all in on the product or you go all in on growing a base of customers. And I would say that growing the base of customers is the wiser move, because then you have them somewhat captive and you can capture more of them into the core product. So I think that's totally the right move. And I totally understand the idea of someone being turned off by this because they don't have the familiarity with the necessary. It would be like me going to a football game with someone that didn't like football. It's like, well, why am I even here? You know, like what, you don't get it. You don't get the game. You don't get the culture. You're not excited about it. So I think that that's cool to open your mind to that, to understand that certain, like, for instance, my father, I always bring up, unfortunately, you know, he's 70. Well, he'll be 73, I think, soon. And,
oh, nice. 71 for
and
me.
yeah, it's there. They're getting up there. Right.
Yeah.
And I always say, Dagan and I always talk about a knockback. Like, my dad is a ridiculous masculine specimen who'd beat the shit out of me still, like, to this day. In fact, like, I often, when I see him, like, punch him, and he'll still grab both of my arms with one hand and just hold them together. And
damn.
just be like, you know, yeah. And I'm like, and he was a firefighter and all that in New York City. And he's got that masculinity, but I know that I can't get him with games. I've tried so many times, and he's a nerd too, which is kind of annoying. Like, he likes fantasy, and he likes sci-fi, but he just doesn't care about games. I've tried so many times, but there's certainly something here for him too. And so I think that's really cool. Let me ask you about this though. I have so many things that I'm writing down here as you're talking. You're obviously motivated. Clearly you're a motivated person. I consider myself somewhat motivated at this stage in my life. I was much more motivated when I was younger. But where does motivation become obsession? How do you feel about the idea of a person, like, when you're playing a game, it's about immersion, right? Whether it's a 2D side scroller, there's some level of immersion, or you're playing something like Starfield where it's all about, like, being there.
Right.
Is there a downside to this sort of gamification in your mind? Like, where because it can become an obsession, right? And I wonder where you stand on that. An example from my own life is when I lived in LA still, I had a scale from Amazon or whatever, and I'd weigh myself every day. And then I would make decisions in the moment based on that. So it would be like, oh, 181. Okay, I'm going to go get 5 guys. Oh, 185. Okay, I'm going to go get a salad. And that's literally how I lived my life for 3 years. And I was like, this sucks. I can't live like this. I need to make broader, better decisions, but not worry about decisions in the moment necessarily. And so when I moved to Virginia in 2019, I never had a scale in my house. I don't have a scale in my house now. And I've only been weighed, I think, twice since I've been here. And the last time I weighed, I was 190, but I'm lifting weights more and stuff like that now. So I think that a lot of that has to do with that. But nonetheless, I'm not trying to be curious about it on the day-to-day basis because I don't want to obsess on it. And I'm wondering where you stand on that. To be able to play a game like Infinite, you're going to need to kind of be in it on a daily basis, or near daily basis, I assume. So is there a downside to that, you think, or do you think the benefits outweigh the negatives?
So I'd say first off is personalization and customization is so important. There's a lot of women, for example, that I've worked with that could not ever track any calorie ever. They were deathly afraid. It was simply an indicator of their self-worth, which was detrimental. It destroyed them. It destroyed their progress, and it destroyed their motivation, right? But there is a better way to approach these things, a progressive way, as if it's almost like a skill in a way. And what I mean by that is maybe tracking nutrition, for example, is not the first step, right? Because I think sometimes when it comes to health and fitness, people kind of just jump into something without really knowing where they should start and what level they're at in the game. And they're thrown into this kind of part in the game where they didn't even progress properly, and they're trying to navigate through these obstacles and challenges mentally, physically, emotionally, and they ultimately fail, right? Like when you tell someone, hey, track everything every day, that's too much, too fast, too far, right? But if you can educate through action, and you just kind of go through that process of learning, everything can change. So, for example, maybe the first step isn't weighing yourself, Colin, right? Maybe the first step is just have a basic understanding of how you look and feel on a day-to-day basis, right? And once you create that distinction of this is who I am, this is how I feel, this is basically where I'm at, then maybe you can progress into understanding that, hey, one number doesn't define my whole entire build, so to speak, right? Just like in any RPG, right?
Yeah, that's well
Um,
said.
there are multiple stats in the game that you can that will always go up and down. And just to kind of carry into the whole gaming aspect, we all actually have a debuff. It's a strength debuff that's on all of us. And it's because of something called sarcopenia, which is a natural degradation of our muscle tissue once we get to a certain age. We don't even know it. We have a debuff that's constantly, just imagine -1 on your stats, like every week. When you know this, you're like, oh my God, like I have this debuff. Why is that? Do I see a big -1? Whoa, hold on. And now that's an indicator, be like, hey, maybe I should actually incorporate strength training. Maybe I should try to increase this one stat. So when you kind of look at it from a stats perspective, and you just look at these numbers as just indicators, and you control how you react, and kind of really get a little bit into some stoicism principles, as far as like, you can't control what happens to you, you only can control how you react, right? When you build that impulse control, you can overcome all of these adversities, all of these obstacles, all of these challenges internally and externally, if you have a proper progression system, which is built into every single game. So to answer your question, Colin, in a way, when it comes to motivation, it's built into everything that we've already been doing. It's just changing your perspective on, for example, that number that you see on the scale. If you know that actually the weekly average is the actual better number to look at, and you measure that compared to week, and whether or not you're trajectorying towards your goals or away from your goals, you now start to look at it as like, wow, this one single number doesn't matter. Hitting my enemy and doing 5 damage doesn't matter. But then if I hit a critical strike, now I did 150, that number now matters. So this is kind of like what I teach. And this is how I've helped a lot of women, for example, overcome their fear and anxiety of tracking nutrition. Once we just broke it down, starting with protein, for example, hey, like don't look at your calories. Don't look at your carbs. Don't look at your fats. Just look at your protein. That's it. Like, how much meat do you got on your plate if you eat meat? Because there's a lot of vegans I worked with as well.
Oof.
How much? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm only kidding. Good.
No. It's a tough journey, especially for vegans. Like statistically, vegans are getting less than 50% of their required protein intake when they're doing resistance training. So it's a hurdle for sure. So that's actually a accurate reaction. But it's little things like that progression, going from protein to then understanding carbs and then understanding fats, and then kind of leveling up that skill till you get to the point of like, wow, now I'm tracking casually. I may not need to track every day. I just kind of have this self-awareness that I built up through leveling my skills and gaining the XP, to just know that like I'm not a prisoner to these numbers. I'm not a prisoner to this process. I have control over it because I have the skill sets. That's the point when people can truly thrive, and they don't have to worry about obsession because they have control over their behavior and how they react.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love especially the inclusion of stoicism, which I think is powerful. I wanted to ask about I guess, how the game works. Like, I'm fascinated by, you brought up Pokemon Go, which I'm really interested in, just from the perspective of, I feel like it introduced to people this idea of like that they were understanding things about video games that they didn't realize they were understanding about them. And
Brilliant.
I knew people that played that game that I was like, so you play Pokemon Go? And I'd be very surprised by this specific person, this type of person. I'm like, so you understand hit points and leveling and equipment and item use. And so you have this really fundamental basis for video games you don't even understand that you have right now just by playing the specific game. So
Boom.
yeah, talk to me a little bit about, talk to me about this.
Yeah, the reason why I brought up Pokemon Go is because that was the first, in my opinion, the first kind of truly mass market fitness gamified approach that was successful in the fitness space. Like there's a lot of people I've met that have lost 40, 50, 60 plus pounds just by literally a phone telling them to go outside and catch a Pokemon, which just increased their step count, it increased their activity, and overall it just elevated their activity just by just playing a game, right? And it fascinated me because I drew inspiration from so many games. Like I can't even describe. You can name a game I probably drew some type of inspiration, and it's most likely incorporated in some way in the Infinite. Any major RPG, and it just gave me this idea that, and also showed me that there is no approach like the one that I've created when it comes to a holistic point of view when it comes to combining the nutritional, physical, and mental aspects in a way that complements fantasy type RPGs. And I was baffled by this, honestly. I was like, there's nothing out there that can satisfy my Elder Scrolls soul, my Final Fantasy soul. Like, how is this possible? And Pokemon Go just did everything right from a motivational standpoint. There's so I don't know if you know, there's a prominent researcher. His name is Yukai Chao in gamification. He's been doing gamification research for over a decade. He started with Diablo as just a normal college student, basically just trying to kind of gamify his life, essentially the similar journey as mine, but he dove into the scientific research around motivation. And basically, there are 8 core drives that drive just human behavior in general. And if you break it down, every game ever created incorporates one of these 8 core drives. And here are the 8 core drives. Number one is epic meaning and calling. So this is a very, very kind of a little bit of an intrinsic motivator. You know, it's the story, the villain, are you overcoming it or becoming this person that's going to save the world? It's like, to people that really draws them into a lot of games, right? Just that calling, like I'm meant to do something, right? That's one of the biggest core drives. Number two is development and an accomplishment. So this is actually my primary core drive. That feeling of progress, that feeling of achievement. I shared my story of Taekwondo. That feeling of getting that next belt, that's what motivated me to keep going. It's what motivated me to continue playing the Taekwondo game, right? And then number three is empowerment of creativity and feedback. Now, this is actually one of the biggest core drives for Tears of the Kingdom. So Tears of the Kingdom has one of the kind of the creation component to it, where you can kind of craft like anything and approach the game essentially how you want to play the game. And
sandbox.
yeah, and all those types of games feed into that core drive. It literally just is like, hey, here are the tools, have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And people love that. I mean, just look at Minecraft, right? Like like still blowing everyone's minds, right? Like after all these years. But I mean, the list really kind of continues, and if you'd like, I mean, we could dive a little bit deeper into that. But there's so many of these core drives that are driven underneath the surface of all the games that we play, but I don't think anyone's ever created that connection with health and fitness and all these underlying motivations and motivators intrinsically and extrinsically that people aren't fully leveraging.
it's interesting. I was writing down as you were talking, like things that were coming to my mind as you were noting the way that things are gamified or have been gamified. And it's like in some subtle way, even like a chore chart, a to-do list,
Boom.
you like shit, like it's very weird. It's all kind of the same. And
Yep.
which is, and it's like a linear or non-linear way of thinking, but I think that I think it's interesting nonetheless. I meant to ask you this earlier. This would have
Yeah.
made sense earlier, but what is the nature of your company? You're the CEO and the
Mhm.
founder, I assume, of the company, but do
Yep.
you have full-time employees? Do you work only with contractors? I'm curious to know like what your structure is as a small business, or presumably a smaller business.
Yeah. So I have three partners. One of them is my fiance, who's our operations manager. Then our two other partners are wizards. So which is our transformation specialists at Infinite, and I basically guide them in helping more gamers, and that's it. That's our team currently, and we've partnered with five major organizations to provide our players or gamers the tools that they need to continue their progress and their success in their health and fitness journey. One of which is Hyperice, which is, you most likely seen it all over watching NFL. Like all NFL players use Hyperice. NFL is one of their partners. We provide that actually for free in one of our game modes, which is our mentorship mode. And basically, we created these strategic partnerships so that we can provide education to all of our employees, all of our staff, and to our players as well. And we really just built this foundation of value, I'd say, of constantly giving value to others and also expanding the value internally. And based on that, we basically we do everything in house, literally. We have apparel as well and all these other aspects that we just provide in addition. And primarily we built Infinite around our three game modes. Now we started off first with just mentorship, but now we have three game modes. Second of which is our academy, which is our online course. Because there's one thing I found in my journey, especially as a fitness professional, is self education was the primary thing I was banking on. But however, there's some missing component to that. What about community? What about accountability? You
Mm.
know, where is this aspect? So that's why I kind of created a collegiate type of system, educational system, where people can kind of immerse themselves in a RPG like learning experience where they create their avatar and they're completing quests and upgrading their skills all inside of a learning environment, which I've yet to see. So this was something that I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite aspects. And then the other game mode is our arena, which is our competitive kind of combat training experience, where competition as a former athlete, like there's this something about competing against someone else that drives you. It pushes you to go above and beyond what you think you're capable of. And it's like, imagine you can compete with somebody on your level, right? Because the worst thing about competition is when you got the state champions, you're going up against the state champions, and there's this gap. And like, no matter how hard you try, it's just a matter of how much you're gonna lose by.
Sure, totally, I understand.
Like, we wanted to
So
create an
matchmaking,
experience.
so yeah, in
There
some
you
way,
go.
yeah,
Multiplayer.
yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, matchmaking, like balanced matchmaking, that is important to keep people involved. I think that there are certain places like chess.com does a really, really awesome job of that, and
Oh
others where
yeah, yeah.
they'll keep you, like, who wants to play a master level player if you have an
A
L of
noob.
800 or something like that. All right, so as we, I guess, begin to wrap up, I wanted to ask you about what the future looks like, I guess, in terms of how do you envision this being played? You can go, and everyone right there can go to infinitrpg.com. It's infitniterpg.com and check it out. I'll put the link in the description as well so people can check it out. So is it played primarily on or tracked, I guess, in some way, primarily on the web and on phone? I guess I'm wondering, like, is there any way to fit this thing on a console? Like like
Ooh.
I mean, there's such a weird array of things coming to the modern console now. We saw this, I mean, it didn't work out, but that abandoned real-time experience where they had like kind of an app and it was supposed to be trailer teasing a game or whatever. Obviously, there's a whole gamut of free-to-play games and apps.
Mm-hmm.
You have your streaming apps and all these different things. Like, so I was, and it's only tangential because I don't really give a shit that it has nothing to do with console or conversation, but I'm wondering, like, is there any way does that work in any way? And then I guess I just wonder, like, how people should find it, how people play, and where the future might lead. Because I feel like I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I feel like you're onto something here. I mean, there's obviously something, there's something really cool here. I mean, I'm not like master entrepreneur, but I think I have a pretty good feel. I'm not in the fitness space at all. I'm as we talked about behind the scenes, I'm a prodigious worker outer. I just don't, I'm not really in that scene. I love doing cardio, especially. That's like I wish my whole body looked like my legs look. If you just saw my legs, you'd be like, oh, this is probably a pretty fit dude. And it's like, no, he looks a little pregnant, but he's hanging in there. But I love doing, a half an hour or an hour of cardio. I usually do high impact interval training on there, and I lift now for the last couple of years. But I don't really track any of it, or I actually just started. I don't know if I told you this, but my weights that I bought on the internet just came with a piece of paper that was probably printed in China, and it had like broken English, and it just showed like different things that you could do, and that's literally that's all I've ever looked at.
Oh man,
so that's like literally all I've ever seen. So I just do random things that I saw, and then like lifting and that, and then with cardio or I use an elliptical because it's good for my knees. I was a goalie in hockey, so my knees are gonna be fucked. And one day, and I feel that coming, and I feel like the elliptical has really done a good job of allowing me to go further or farther or whatever. But I probably have never had better cardio health in my entire life than I do right now. And awesome. So typically I do at least a half an hour a day, but typically an hour. And I go 75% incline, 75% power, high interval training. So 1 minute normal, 1 minute hard, 1 minute normal, 1 minute backwards, 1 minute normal, 1 minute hard, so on and so forth. And then every so often, like once a week, I'll just jack it all the way up to 100 and I'll do it for a half an hour, and that just murders me. So that's about as much as I do, but I do that every day. And a part of that is I love metagames. So I'm really into trophy hunting and all that kind of stuff in PlayStation. Really it's a matter of earning my food in some way. And I know that the saying is, and it's definitely true, you cannot outrun your diet. Nope. And that's simply true. But too that and everyone out there knows whether they like it or not, whether they're into it or not, is that I just do interval intermittently fast every day for at least 20 hours. And so that's how I love my water and all that kind of stuff. So I have no problems there, but that's how I take care of myself. But it'll be interesting to be able to gamify that and structure something around that. So I guess talk to the everyman out there and tell, and as we conclude, I threw a lot at you there, but generally let's focus on how can it be found and how can it be used for people like me?
Yeah, so primarily we run through mobile applications. So we have a mobile app for each one of our game modes. And that's kind of the user experience that I wanted to have, because prior to that, like, you should have seen the very early stages of even when I was coaching or training. Like, it was all pieces of paper and emails, and it took you out of the experience, right? And fortunately, when I was going into college, originally for computer science. I was going to be a game designer, actually. And ironically, I'm like a game designer in my own way now.
Dude, I think based on what you've built, it's not segue or parlayed into a proper video game as we understand it, but it's deep game design. I mean,
thank you.
You definitely deserve credit for that. I mean, there's just no doubt about that.
Oh, thank you, man. So yeah, like, I basically wanted to create a mobile app, and lo and behold, I partnered with a big company at the time who's now big. It's called Trainerize, and I gave them all of my coding and all of my ideas, and we partnered, and I basically helped them build this app, and now it's everywhere. It's super cool. But that was the foundation. But where I see it going is right now we have an app for each game mode. I see a singular app, a single app experience. Because right now our avatar system, which is our character creator, is on our website and it's not in our app. So I want to combine all of these different areas into one singular place and have that be available to everyone. Anyone who has a phone can access this and approach this. So if you're going to the gym, you have a phone, right? I don't know anyone who doesn't go to the gym without a phone. You can pull this up and literally be immersed into Infinite. Like that's my goal, that's my dream. And having that singular app experience also opens up the gateway for it to also be on like consoles or things like that, right?
Well,
Because
this is what I'm wondering. Like, this is probably too complicated and it would be very expensive probably. And I don't even know if the app, if you could even use hardware like this, but it's like, what about, and I'm showing for people that are listening, my watch. It's like, could this just send everything to, or does it already send everything to the game or whatever? I mean,
yeah,
in other words, like living the game without even being in it would probably be the goal, right? Like it knows that you're doing, when I work out, even when I go for a walk around the neighborhood, I go on my phone, or on my watch, I'm like, I'm going for a walk. When I go on the elliptical, it's like, I'm on the elliptical and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And all you would need to do is do that with some sort of module. I guess that would be the goal, right? That would be sick.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me would be a revolutionary thing that I don't think I've seen yet. And now you're getting into now you're getting into Ring Fit Adventure and like the big things where it's like, this could, yeah. So talk to me about this.
Yeah, so that again kind of always goes back to Pokemon Go. Like they were like, in my opinion, the first person to do that, where you just literally pull up the app and now you're in the world of Pokemon, right? Like that's kind of like that immersive type of like, you do you remember when Microsoft came out with like the HoloLens
Yeah.
and things like that? Almost like a augmented type of reality where it's like you
AR.
can
Or mixed reality or whatever.
Yeah, like that is what I can see where you can literally go to the gym, right? You can see what other people's class is. Like, are you an orc? Are you a barbarian? Are you a ninja? You can see their level, right? You can like pull up their stats, right? And you can just see how far they are in the game of Infinite. And that's truly what I see in the future is like anyone who plays this game you can kind of connect with, right? Because I it's not just the user experience, it's also the experience of everyone else playing the game as well. In a way, I'm not calling it an MMORPG, but in a way, like that's kind of what I can see this becoming, especially if it goes global, similar to what Pokemon Go did, where you got Pokemon Go people literally everywhere. Like you just go down the street and someone's playing Pokemon Go, you know what I'm saying? Like I can see that, but the first step to getting to that future is number one is helping more gamers. Number one. So if you're a gamer that's struggling, if you're a gamer that has health issues or health complications or self-image issues, anything that you're struggling with internally or externally, this could be a solution for you. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I've seen people transform before my very eyes. And just know that there is a solution out there. You might have tried so many diets, so many training programs, all these different things, but you have not tried Infinite yet. Don't give up. This could be a solution for you.
Cool. Well said. I mean, this is a great conversation. I totally think you're obviously onto something here. I think there's a natural fit and a fusion between these worlds. And it's important for people to hear those messages, I think, like you just delivered. And that's what we were trying to deliver too, is like, just take care of yourself and take some sort of step and don't let it get too bad. I mean, that's what I'm really, yes. That's what I said before. We said this on the Constellation recently, where I was, the polite lie where someone will be like, yo, you look good or whatever. And Micah and I have a thing where it's like, and where I told her, I'm like, if you think I'm getting heavier, you need to tell me. Like, I need to know, because I don't want to be too, my heaviest, I was 200 pounds in probably 2009, 2010. and I probably got down to 170 or something. But that was when I was just not exercising and doing anything. I just wasn't eating. So
Mm,
now that I'm a little more muscular and moving and all of that, I'm probably in the high 180s now. Again, I have no idea really, or maybe 190, but I feel like I just want to sustain that below 200 pounds. And if I get above that again, that's kind of a klaxon call. So that's kind of what I
mhm.
want to tell people out there is like, it sucks if it's gone too far and you need to do more work. But if you're, especially in that inner space between where you can still nip it in the bud if you just made changes now, this is something that
Right.
my brother Dagan was just lamenting, is that like and we couldn't believe it, is that he was diagnosed as like pre-diabetic or whatever. And it's like,
Mm.
dude, what? You know, like how is that possible? But you know, you're in that interstitial stage where you can still do something about it. And
Yep.
so I just think it's important for people to take action in some way, or you'll just
It's
wallow. So yeah.
it's never too late. Take action. The oldest person I've ever helped was 74 years old. He did not even give up. At 74 years old, you think, oh, I spent majority of my life. This is how my life is going to be for the rest of my life. It's like, no. He decided, I'm going to take action. I'm going to learn. I'm going to be a better person today. And something to take away is today plus today equals your goals. Forget about the past. Forget about everything else. Don't get caught up in the future. Like just focus on today. Do something today, and that will compound over time. It's it, and I'll leave off with this. There's
Mm.
that South Park episode. I don't know if you remember the World of Warcraft episode
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where Cartman grinds boars to get like 1 XP, like over and over and over and over and over again. But what happened is after grinding that over and over and over again, what happened? Right? He basically max leveled. Like he was like this powerful character in the game that just stomped everybody, right? And it's like in the health and fitness game, it's no different. Just imagine every positive choice that you make, you're gaining XP, and that XP will compound over time into whoever you want to become. So just know that it really starts with making a decision today, and you can do it. And you have a support system, you have a platform, you have the systems, you have the processes to do that at Infinite. And there's so many other people that can support you, like people like you, other gamers that are struggling with the same things that you're struggling with too, that are all learning and trying to grow with you. You can do it with all this help.
Yeah, well said. I think that this is, I just think that a lot of times games coverage, in my experience doing it and kind of being around it, it's all about the ethereal and the fun, but never about that you can't have any of that fun without being grounded in some sort of health and wellness. You have to be here with
Mhm.
us in order to take advantage of it. And um, I don't know. I don't like when people shy away from real issues, whether it's political or economic in the
I
video
agree.
game industry, whether it's health related in the industry. It's like, it's important. And I know just from that Cog episode that it touched people. And I think this will as well. And in addition to what people are going to hear after this, which is a conversation all about mental wellness. So, all right, Walt, let's go through it one more time. Where can people find you and the game? And we'll leave it there.
Yeah, so again, my name is Walt Chambers. You can find Infinite at www.infinite, INFITNITE, And we're Infinite RPG on all platforms, Twitter, X, Instagram, YouTube, and things like that. Feel free to go to our website and either reach out to me. And something that I want to give all the listeners who've made it this far into the podcast is I want to do exactly what I did for Colin before we decided to have this conversation today is I want to give everyone a professional assessment of where you are on your fitness journey and where you want to go so that we can truly make a strategy and a plan of action to get from where you are now to where you want to be. So anyone who's gotten to this point, reach out to us at infiniterpg.com, say you came from the LSM podcast, and I will sit down with you for free to truly have a better understanding of where you are so that we can guide you in a better direction for your health and wealth and fitness.
Sweet. That's awesome. That's very generous of you. Again, I get nothing from this, so I don't want anyone to think I'm getting any ad rev or anything like that. I think that's just very, very generous and very nice of you. So appreciate you doing that for the audience, and
My
I
pleasure.
think we'll have appreciated this talk as well. So Walt, I appreciate you. It's good to meet you and have you here, and hopefully we'll have you back maybe in the future to talk about where this has evolved over time. Okay, that's the end of my talk with Walt. Now we get into my talk with Michael. So that was Body. This is Mind. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by a very special guest from all around the world, from all the way around the world, I should say, Michael Pekin. Welcome to the show, my friend. I want to read your email at least a piece of your email that you sent to me in a moment. But before I do that, I want to welcome you to the show. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Colin. How are you doing?
I'm all right. It's you're in Australia, right?
That's correct. Yes, it's
And
3
it's
a.m.
really late, right?
3 a.m. Yes.
Yeah,
The
but you
time at the
wanted
moment.
to do it at this time, right? I was told.
I did. Yes.
And,
I have a 3-year-old, and she's amazing and beautiful, but very chaotic. So 3 a.m.'s a good stable time for
oh,
something like
interesting.
this.
All right. Well, cool. Parent energy. I appreciate it. Um, I'm doing a couple of back-to-back episodes just serendipitously about health. One of them will be about more physical health, and I wanted to talk to you today about mental health. This is what I wanted to read, and I don't do this very often, and I hope you don't mind. It's not like there's anything personal in it, but I
Mm.
wanted to kind of frame this conversation that we're going to have today, Michael, with a portion of your email, and I brought it up. And you said you talked about how you recently had the opportunity to view the podcast episode of physical health. That was the one Cog and I did. And you say, I have the privilege to serve as youth counselor for the past 3 years at a distinguished nonprofit organization known as Headspace, located in Australia. Throughout my tenure, I have hosted various in-house training sessions centered around gaming's impact on mental well-being, thoroughly exploring both its advantages and potential drawbacks. I have had the privilege of engaging with numerous young individuals, aiding them navigating their gaming behaviors and lifestyles. In addition to my counseling responsibilities, I oversee a thriving gaming community tailored to the needs of young people. This community encompasses competitive events and rewarding activities, contributing positively to the local social fabric. Considering the diverse array of perspectives often associated with gaming, I believe that a conversation addressing its impact from a mental health standpoint can be both enlightening and valuable. It is my observation that certain viewpoints cast gaming in a negative light, and I envision that such a discussion could shed light on the more nuanced aspects of this dynamic. You're a good writer, Michael, first of all. So congratulations on that. It's a high
Thank
compliment
you.
from someone like me. I'm only kidding. It probably isn't. But I wanted to read that because I thought that was put into words better than I could ever explain what I wanted to talk to you about today. I want to know more about why you reached out specifically, and I think what we can positively contribute to the conversation around games, mental health, and more, because I agree, and I come from a much more layman perspective than you do in this regard. I don't understand the incessant negativity surrounding gaming from a mental standpoint when I feel like people are just doing this all day. And for people that are listening to it, just having a phone 2 inches from their face. So let's start from the very beginning, Michael. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about what it's like in Australia with the water going around the other direction when you flush the toilet. I want to know everything about you. So talk to us a little bit about you.
Of course. So, my name is Michael Pekin. I've been working for a non-for-profit youth mental health agency for roughly about 3 years now. I've been playing games for I think as long as I can remember. When my dad uh, bought me and my brother a Super Nintendo, and it was absolutely fantastic present.
How old are you?
Sorry, 33.
Yeah. I understand having
Um,
to think about it too, because I'm not entirely sure how old I am most of the time either. Yeah.
yeah. And after Super Nintendo, my dad bought us a PlayStation, and that was sort of it from there. PlayStation, PS2, PS3, PS4, now PS5. Been absolutely loving that, and I've been fortunate enough to, I guess, use gaming as sort of an entry point in a lot of aspects of my work, whether in terms of the group that I run or use it to help young people. I just remember it all started from my my big boss just walking past me and a young person one day. We were playing Among Us of all things on our mobiles because we were just killing some time, and she saw that and she's like, "What are you guys doing?" I'm like, "Oh, we're just we're playing a game together." And she was like, do you think you could do that with like more young people and stuff like that?" And it's just all developed from there.
I'm sorry. I always write notes as I'm going. I'm already writing notes that are making me laugh about things I want to ask you later, specifically about old people and why they're always so mystified by video games. But we'll get to that at some point. Okay. So what is your professional experience? You're 33, so you're born in 89? 90?
90.
90?
Yeah.
So you already had your birthday this year. See, I was born in
Mhm.
84. I'm 38, but I haven't had my birthday yet. But I'm also not very good at mathematics. So you got to bear with me a little bit, Michael. Tell me a little bit about, did you go to college for something specific, or you're working with kids? So I'd like to know more about, how you found your way into this space.
So I found my way in this space almost accidentally, which is quite funny. But this is one of those things, Australian things. So we have university here, and I went to university and did a bachelor degree in human services for about 3 years. I was originally doing education to do teaching in primary schools, but I had a placement with the school for about a week. So it's really just getting in there, doing sort of getting not chucked in the deep end, but maybe shadowing someone, another teacher, and doing some exercises there. I ended up finishing my week and thought, don't think teaching's meant for me. It's not my thing. So I went back to the university and had a big think about it. And then my university sold its campus to another university. And then I had a look at what degrees they were offering. And the only thing that really, I guess, fit my framework was human services. And then my placement with my human services degree was with the company I'm with now. And I had that placement and I finished it and I thought, this is it. This is where I'm meant to be. And then when I had just finished my degree, they were looking for more positions and I applied and got the role.
Sorry, I realized I was muted. I'm having work done in my house, so I wanted to minimize the noise there. I don't know if you've had like work done where you live, but I want to just get it all done at once. Like instead of like little bits of chaos, Michael, like here and there, it's like, let's just get it really fucking crazy here right now. We'll have the guy put in the extra light. We'll have the guy fix the thing. We'll have the guy do the shelving. We'll just have it all at one time. So it's a little nuts right here. So sorry about that if you hear it in the background. To your point about I love the vernacular, I guess the lexicon we have in the United States. We go to there are colleges and universities. They're indistinguishable. They don't mean anything different from us, but we don't say we're going to university. We say we're going to college, because I went to a university, but I say I went to college. And your college sounds a lot like mine, Northeastern, because in Boston, because they do a very similar thing with what's called co-oping, which is like where they kind of get you with a company before you even graduate, and then you get an offer from them typically when you graduate. That's what they're famous for. I actually ended up not doing that because IGN snagged me away. So I just graduated and fled. Okay, so we got a little bit of a background here about how you got into this space, which is interesting, this headspace. All right, so let's talk about the people. Let's I'm going through my notes here trying to figure out how I want to structure this. I think the best way we would do this now is to talk about who you work with, the kinds of children you work with, ages, maybe socioeconomic backgrounds, if that's relevant. I have no idea. Like, are they just like kids from broken homes? Are they kids that just need a place to be after school or whatever? I don't know. So you can tell me all about that. And then we'll get into the gaming, because I'm really interested. See, all of my knowledge about the way kids interact with games is just through my 6 nieces and nephews. And that's very anecdotal, especially because I've completely indoctrinated half of them. So they don't have a natural like inclination. They're like, 2 of them are like huge PlayStation fanboys. I'm like, that's not normal for an 11-year-old. So I want to hear a little bit about who you work with.
Yeah, of course. So typically the age range is 12 to 25. And so we get people from sort of the whole spectrum of that sort of socioeconomic background because we're a free service. The model is a free service, but you have, I guess, a limited amount of sessions. So when it comes to the work I do with young people, specifically in that counselling space, I feel I guess the other socioeconomic, I guess, factor is kind of mood. I find people all over the spectrum financially. A lot of parents, they don't know what to do and they're not sure how to deal with the situation if they're playing, I don't know, good classic examples, Fortnite for 12 hours a day. But yeah, so as far as the group, that I run, that's anyone could be off the street. You don't have to even be a part of the counselling service to attend it. I make it open for anyone. So, but we can get anywhere between 10, 15 people a week coming in. and it can be a range of like about 12 to 20 we come in total.
So Fortnite, I had to write that down. What a shame. It's fine. It's obviously a very good game. It's just I wish kids were playing like 12 hours of something else, like Civilization 5 or something cool like that. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about gaming behavior from the point of view of, I guess, your average child. This is kind of a tough question to answer, but like, what are people playing and how are they using games today, and how are you trying to redirect them? Because one of the important things you say in your message is that you use competitive events or rewarding activities and all of those kinds of things as part of your counseling responsibilities, but that you see advantages and both potential drawbacks for gaming and mental well-being, which I find fascinating, because I think there's obviously mental drawbacks, and I don't think people in our space specifically want to talk about that because we don't want to come off as Jack Thompson-esque or whatever and crazy, but obviously games require a deeper study, just like everything does. So talk to me a little bit about things from that perspective.
So, and that evolves into a lot of the, when you said you're talking about older people with not sort of understanding, that's why I did those in-house sort of trainings for it as well. So some of those drawbacks I always attributed, and at the time when I did my training, a lot of it was around the live service aspect of games. The classic example I use when they were saying, well, how is this game profitable when it's free? And I believe the example I used was at the time, God of War 2018 had made $26 million, which I think is very respectable, whereas Fortnite made $27 billion, purely based on those microtransactions. And I sort of focused my stuff around, if I talk to a young person, one of the things I'll test is, I guess, if they're receiving a form of like dopamine abuse by these games. And those types of live service games I've seen where they, not just the microtransactions, but little things like, hey, you got daily login bonuses, you got really heaps of rewards early on, and then stretch it out the more you play. What we call a Skinner box style of gameplay loop. So it's doing the same thing, but getting low rewards just to keep that grind going. They're having the multiple forms of currency. It's just all these things, I guess, that's meant to keep you engaged, and even really just if you start sinking money in the microtransactions, I guess you can feel a sense of perceived commitment towards the game, if that makes sense. Like, well, I've already put in some money, I might as well keep going.
Right. Sunken cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So a lot of this has to do with specifically with, I guess, gotcha style really gamified, free to play and all of that. Do you deal very much with games in like the more traditional respect, or is it really just have like in just that space primarily?
So most of my experience I've seen with the more live service aspect, things like Fortnite, Valorant's one. It hasn't come to PlayStation yet, but apparently it's coming. Yeah, lots of things like that. Other games which I've had more positive interactions with are things like your Minecraft, and we can obviously get into the positive interactions if you'd like later. But most of the things I've seen with the I guess the support with the young people and the parents is that sort of more live service, more aimed at the free to play gacha style, especially in the last week. I want to say a game just came out mobile, the Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis.
Yeah, I've seen ads for that.
Yeah, and I downloaded. I love Final Fantasy VII. I downloaded to check it out, and I was almost overwhelmed because there's like, I don't know, like 20 different menus on the title screen, and keep flashing ads for these things, and buy this currency, buy this, and I was like, shit, it's always too much for me.
Yeah, they're being bombarded in some way. It's so interesting because I just don't, and this is just so fucking myopic, but I don't understand. There's something I don't understand about, all right, so kids are spending all this time in front of their computers, or so they're said, or on their phones, or whatever, but they're playing these highly social games. To me, when I was a kid, the big deal would have been like a big 100-hour role-playing game coming out and me losing my mind to that. If a game like Starfield, which is just too big for my adult ADD mind, but when I was 16 or something, if Starfield came out, I probably would have been lost for a year in that game. And those were the kinds of games that would have been my problem. So it's so interesting that the persistence of these free to play games as a service seem to be, the live service games seem to be a major problem. And I assume that's the accessibility, you would assume, right? Of them kind of having no barrier to entry.
I would I would assume so. Maybe the wide adoption by young people, like not having a lot of money. Like I remember you have like one game for like 3 months when you get on your birthday, but young people now, they're like 12 years old, they have access to a suite of games that are free to play, even if they don't have Game Pass or PlayStation Extra.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I don't like socially, it just doesn't line up with me. Like people are just a lot different than I think gamers were when we were younger.
Yeah.
So you talked to me, you use this really interesting term that I have never heard before. You just used it, called dopamine abuse.
Mm.
Is this a term of art? Like, talk to me about what this might mean.
Um, Unsure if it's a term of art. It's sort of one I've adopted. So it's just things I've seen where I think I've related directly to the negative things of gaming. Maybe to give it a label to parents as well, who are looking, I guess, for maybe a sense of an answer, who are not sure what to find it. And I kind of saw it originally around gambling originally. So that sense of you get that dopamine hit when you win and you're chasing it. So I see that a bit in a similar sense to those types of, I guess, games where you get that hit and you keep wanting it. And a lot of those games where they thrive on that type of behavior, where it's like you just need a little bit more, got to get a little bit more, a little bit extra, got to do this, got to do that.
It's so interesting because the returns, I guess this is because you're a child, but the return is so stupid, right? Like gambling, you understand a little bit more, right? Like I understand gambling a little bit more. I spent a lot of time in Vegas. I love to gamble personally. It's fantasy football season here in the United States. So I'm like, and we're running ads for DraftKings and
Mm,
stuff. But what I've always been intrigued by, like we're doing the DraftKings ad, is we have these things we have to read, right? And half of the thing we have to read for DraftKings is just, if you have a gambling problem, if you have a gambling addiction, it's almost like children are now being engineered to become that, which is kind of scary. Like I was introduced to gambling young because I had older siblings, but it never got out of control. And you imagine if you have that propensity at 8 or 10 years old to be like, I want a gotcha box, or I want, Fortnite skins, or I want to get like some random loot box. How is that going to translate when you have money in your pocket and you're in fucking off track betting, doing things like that? Do you think there's I mean, it's kind of a sciencey question, but do you think there's some sort of connection in engineering people like that? That's the scary part to me. It's like not even the video games itself. The video games themselves seem they're just time sinks. And unless you're
mm.
a whale, you can't really spend that much money on them. The thing I worry about is kids having a predilection to that mindset by the time they get older. I wonder if there's a connection there.
It'd be interesting. I mean, I know why. That's why they loot boxes got targeted really heavily back in the day, and I know there's a lot of I guess defense around them now. I know the sort of gotcha's coming back in a lot of games like Genshin Impact and things like that. And what's their new game? Is it Honkin' Star Rail?
Yeah,
I
their
think
new
it
one.
is. That hasn't come to PlayStation yet, which I get tempted to play because it's a turn-based style.
It looks awesome. I just
Yeah, it
refuse to
does.
play. Dude, I wish I could just see, like, it's the same thing with Genshin, because I thought Genshin Impact looked kind of cool too, but
Mm,
I was like, I remember thinking about this. I always use, it's such a stupid example because it's old, but when Plants vs. Zombies 2 came out and you simply couldn't buy it.
mm,
Like, no matter what you did, it was like, no, we're going to microtransaction you. You can't just give us $20 and we'll leave you alone. And I see games like this and I'm like, just sell me $100 forever pass for Honkai Star Rail or whatever. It's probably more money than your average kid will ever spend on the game.
yeah.
And I don't know. So but I'm sure they want the whales and they don't care about people like me. What is, by the way, in Australia, what is the situation with sports gambling there? Is it legal? Like in the United States, I don't know how familiar you are with it here, but sports gambling was limited to very specific places, Vegas, Atlantic City, stuff like that. And in the last 5 years or so, it's flexed to many states because there's a revenue draw there for all the state governments. And so basically when you watch sports now, it's just all gambling commercials. It's all, not, let's not say all, I want to literally say 50% of the commercials I see during an NFL game are gambling. Is that similar in Australia, or has it been a little tighter there?
No, I'd say it's relatively the same. We get ads all the time for things. We have things like sports bet and things like that. And then the main, I guess, source of physical gambling we do in now casinos as well.
Yeah, that's I don't know, dude. It's that's the nexus that troubles me with this. Because how much damage can you really do to a kid with Genshin Impact? It's like not that much. I mean, even if you go to one of the games, it's like, oh, well, Fortnite's a bad example because you could probably spend tens of thousands of dollars in that game on just skins. But there are games where it's like, what is the maximum amount of money you can even spend in Destiny 2 or something, like really. But then you see, that kid gets that formative mind starts to grow something that at 20 years old, they find themselves in a casino and they have the same mentality, and then it matters because then it's not stupid. And that's the stuff that scares me. I'm writing that down. I want to explore that more. All right. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Michael, was something you brought up earlier, and you had mentioned it a little bit in your email to me too. I think we use the term mystification for the way parents feel. Why do you think, and this was something I mentioned earlier, why are parents so mystified by video games? Why don't they understand? Obviously, they're busy. Obviously, it's a lot. Like when I was being brought up, there weren't all of these goals to protect, basically, where you're playing goalie in like 7 different nets because you got the internet and you got your fucking phone and your parents, you're worrying about this, that, and the other thing. It was different when I was a kid, and I totally understand that. But why is there such mystification? Because the generation of people that are having kids today grew up with video games. So I'm a little lost as to why. It's not like my parents are in their 70s, and so it makes more sense why they would be mystified by it.
It's interesting. I've done a lot of really thinking about that because I've had the same thought where, I've had my daughter now and I'd be like, I feel I'd be so much, I guess, clearer about the boundaries with gaming and obviously playing them with her and stuff like that. But that's just me. But it's interesting. I've thought about that and I've kind of come to the conclusion that maybe a few of them have grown up on games, but they've grown up on those Mario games, like the paid ones. Like, I guess that those games have a start point and an end point. They have a purpose to them. And maybe there's maybe less of an understanding of these broader games that don't necessarily have an end.
Yeah, it's it's so weird because I just remember my parents being like, get away from these things. And they were like, it's so quaint when you think about it. They were stories I was reading. I was probably reading more in some of these games than I was reading in a book, and they just didn't understand it. But then I still encounter people today that think games are still in the 80s or even in the early 80s, like pre-NES 80s, where they're like a Pac-Man or something. It's very confusing to me. What are some of the positive ways that you try to funnel your young people into using games or understanding them? My assumption on this, right, is that you can't really decouple video games from their lives completely. I don't know how you would do that. So unless you just really took them off the grid, which I think would do them a huge disservice for modernity and education and all that. So like in other words, there's something, I don't have kids, right? There's something very attractive about being like, we're moving to the woods and we're going to raise this kid with no phone but then they get into the world and they don't know what the hell they're doing. And in some way you have to almost embrace it. And so I totally understand that. So how are you funneling people towards a more positive use of games?
Yeah, so I don't, obviously, when I talk to young people and we talk about the positive aspects, I don't recommend going full Amish, that side of it. But we, I talk about what they like and maybe recommend some stuff. They're like I know you've had multiple discussions about it because I listen every week, but like whatever it says about, Game Pass and PS Plus Extra, as you said, the barrier of entry for the consumer is really good for the short term. And a lot of the young people I have are subscribed to either because it is just very cost effective for them, but just seeing what's there, what they like, and maybe engaging in more of those single player ones at home. And I have had a couple of people, and Dustin would approve, but getting him into Persona 5.
Nice.
Because it's just a lot of them are already fans of like anime. And I said, guys, this is anime, the game, You can make your choices, you can have that sort of social aspect. But so I always see gaming, especially, this is me personally, but I always say it, and that's why I say to parents, it's a sense of art, like reading or watching movies or consuming music. It's just maybe more interactive, and that's how I sort of view gaming, and especially those like sort of single player games. Like very surreal experience for me recently, where with The Last of Us, obviously the TV show, and after the finale, I was talking to my mum about The Last of Us finale and about like, what do you think about what Joel did in this situation? And I was just like, this is so surreal because I played this game on PS3 10 years ago and I'm able to do this, but that sort of is just shows me where I'm like, this is where you can have these senses of art in these games where they're not just, Pac-Man, get the balls, Mario, get the princess, jump on the turtle. Like there's beauty and art in some of these stories and the experiences, and that's a really good thing to experience in your life. And other aspects I found in games I really incorporate in my in the group that I run. So I know a lot of people who I've talked to, they have instances where they might have a form of like social disconnect in that physical social space, and that's what my group does. Is just, if you want, you can come in here for an hour to 2 hours on one day a week, and we'll just play games together. We have what do we have? We have two Switches, a PS5, and a Wii that was donated, and I brought in my Super Nintendo Mini as well. We got three
Nice.
TVs and just hook them all up. And I'm like, you want to play some retro games? Yeah, you can. I think mostly we play our Switch. We got two Switches, and we'll play Mario Kart or Super Smash Brothers and things like that. And just, my main focus there is like, go at your own pace, in forms of engagement, what you want to do. And then most of the people, they come in for after about 4 weeks, they're talking to other people, they're shit talking a bit, which is fine as long as it's not too far, like healthy competitive behavior. But I'm always saying, just come in, have fun, and then it's sort of, they naturally form a community. Like I don't try and force it, but they sort of do it themselves, which is what I'm sort of aiming for.
Yeah. How is like, I mean, this is probably a difficult question because there's no such thing as averages when you're dealing with individuals, but like, what's your average kind of kid coming in? What's he or she like? Like, what's the age? I'm curious about this, and like, what are you trying to specifically dissuade them from, like at the beginning?
So I guess to my group, it's separated into two groups we have in the one day. So I have a casual, which is anyone can come, and a competitive, which is you have to be 15 older, and then it's and that's sort of separated into each school term in the 4 school terms of the year. We run a competition each school term. So generally, my casual, I would say the 12 to 16 the general ages, and I find 15 to 18 are my general ages for the competition. And it's not like I'm not really dissuading them from anything. I think it'd be a hard sell to be like, come here and I'm going to tell you not to do things. But
Right.
it's like, if they just want to come in and, they want to play something on their laptop, that's fine. But I'll always, go in and have a chat to them and engage them, seeing, just how they're going. But generally they'll just come in and just be like, have a seat. I'll have our big TV and our projector going at the same time. And I'm like, what do you guys want to play? Let's just have fun. Because sometimes it's just about just giving them a space to have fun, because they might not have that.
Yeah, I read a little bit of Headspace's website, and yeah, like, so it's really like a combination of, you can get help with schoolwork, you can go have a place like just in your community to go talk to someone, obviously mental health and all of the rest. So this is really just like a small, or not a small necessarily, but just a vertical of like, or a silo of the different things that Headspace does, right?
Yeah, the main stuff is the mental health counselling. I think the 4 core streams are the mental health counselling, drug and alcohol counselling, health and sexual health, and school, like vocational and educational support.
And is this, I saw that you could donate on the website, but is it government funded too? Like some sort of combination of public, private funds or whatever?
Yeah, it's not for profit, but there is also funding from the government as well.
Cool. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Like, it reminds me a little. It's like a combination of some things we have in the States, like one part YMCA, one part like Head Start or something. I don't know, the different kind of things we have here that are all piecemeal in these states. All right, so I wanted to touch on this thing, and I had written this in my notes because I had noticed this, is that you had spoken, and you had just had done it recently again, about kind of kids coming in, having maybe immersed in a certain game and getting them on as something else. Why specifically? Because I guess what I'm saying is, it sounds to me like you're saying kind of one-off games are just healthier. Is it because they lack those ways of buy-in, especially with like the lack of games don't really have their multiplayer suites anymore. They're not really trying to nickel and dime you outside of DLC. So there's no real way for them to shake you upside down, you know, and like get all the coins out of your pockets. Is that kind of what you're trying to avoid by instilling that in them, since these other games are basically predatory by nature?
Yeah, I'd say those types of games, maybe you would see it, I guess, issues develop earlier um, than when other games, because I think there's been a stigma with gaming, I think, God, since its inception, whether or not it's evolved in certain ways. But
Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
you just see it with these types of predatory games, as you said. You just see the issues develop earlier rather than, and it might be more obvious where there are sessions where they're on for like 10 hours, which isn't new as well. It's not a new issue, as you said. You could just play Final Fantasy 6 for like 10 hours a day, and people will be like, what are you doing? Get off that. But um, I don't know. I suppose, again, with Final Fantasy 6, there is an ending, whether or not you replay it and do this and do that, but just clear, cohesive story where if you describe it, where you could say, like, it's a story, and it's a bit like it's a fantasy game, and here are all these characters, and here's they grow through the story, and then it takes a turn, and I apologize if it's a spoiler for Final Fantasy 6, and you're like Kefka, and he's a villain, and this is how he sort of evolves and takes over, and all these cool things where you talk about, like again, not to keep bringing it up, but like Genshin Impact, where it's like, well, these are the characters, and I guess this is sort of their basic thing, and here's a character, Aloy, from like a PlayStation game, and she looks a lot worse than she does in the PlayStation game.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, it seems like it's like, and this is a personal opinion on mine, but like it seems like there's something lost where I could talk about I could talk about things like stories and things like God of War and things like that, and just really get an in-depth conversation about, I guess, what it means and the parallels, and how that can even come to like parenting, stuff like that, where I can't really do the same thing. I know you came with games like Destiny, who have that expanded lore, and you love doing that. But I know Destiny doesn't seem as predatory
It's
with
not.
some
I
stuff.
also don't think it has that. I think I mean, this is all relative, but it also doesn't seem to be that beloved anymore compared to the way it used to be.
No.
Like it doesn't. I know that just from being close to a few like Chris and others, where they're just like, I don't know, man. It keeping or Cog, like keeping you engaged in story is harder over long periods of time. That's why there's few shows that go 5, 6, 7 seasons and so on and so forth. I think there. Do you think that there's? I personally, and again, I'm happy to put a value judgment on it, but I just think that there's more value in those kinds of games than there are
Mm.
in your Fortnites and your Genshin Impacts, just based on the fact that they're it's like reading a book back in the day that never perceivably ended, where you could just keep buying serialized pulp novels of a story that just literally will never ever
Mm.
end. And that doesn't sound exciting or interesting to me either, especially because it's kind of disappointing that this has happened during an era where games are so enlightening in some ways and so deep. And you could even play old games that have real deep stories and immersion, where I would personally make the argument that I don't really believe that a kid gets much more out of a book, like a novel, than they would out of, I don't know, The Witcher 3 or something. Like if you played The Witcher 3 completely, read everything, listened to everything, saw everything there was in the game, or you read the Witcher novels, you would get different things out of them. You'd certainly enrich in your lexicon and your vocabulary with reading the books and all of that. But I don't know that we have, I guess what I'm saying is a value judgment on which experience is better than the other. And to me, I'm like, it's about literacy and all those things, no doubt. But I personally want to push people towards saying, like, this is a valuable way to spend your time, to entertain yourself, to learn, and all of the rest. And it's happening at the same time that we're being bombarded with this bullshit like Fortnite. That's fine in and of itself, but
Mm.
is, as I said, inherently predatory just on the nature of it doesn't need you to buy it once. It needs you to buy it over and over again. So I actually think there is value personally, Michael, in pushing people away from those games and being like, no, these games are better. Not only because we like them better, but because they respect you more. I mean, imagine what a game like Starfield could do to a person if it was free to play. I
Yes,
mean,
well,
and
that's
the
true. Yeah.
thousands of dollars they could make off of you, right? Potentially. So I personally, do you try to make that value judgment at all? That like that I think that there is something to be said there, talking to parents and kids being like, you're just better served here. I know you said that earlier, but like long
Yeah.
term, you're better served here.
So I put in a recommendation if I sort of know what they like, and do then I just find it funny what you were saying before with the like having that sort of serialized book compared. I just for some reason I just thought like imagine like a Hardy Boys book, but
Mhm.
like but the mystery doesn't end. It's just like the mystery continues, and there's 20 volumes of the same mystery, just little tweaks, and the Rock joins up for some reason.
Right, exactly.
yeah,
And you start having weird universe crossovers and things.
yeah,
Totally. Because you're right. Like the serialized stuff or like the procedural stuff, like Hardy Boys is a great example. Even something more recent, like Goosebumps or something. These are different stories that you don't even have to read them in order or anything like that. So
yeah,
I totally understand. Oh man, and then it just sucks that you have to kind of expose, I guess, kids to the other direction, or they're just going to be naturally exposed to the easiest, lowest hanging fruit on their parents' phone or tablet when they're kids, or their laptop, their Chromebook. I don't know, man.
also the best again as we said, the financially sound option. That's the sad thing, because it is more financially sound to play these games from their and from a parent's perspective if they're maybe not well versed in that type in like the gaming space as well. It's like these games are free, sweet, let's just do that instead.
Right, but it's what you said earlier too, Michael. That's so interesting in that with Game Pass and PlayStation Plus, as long as they're educated and know, it's like it's not even. And I speak from a point of privilege, and I understand that, but I don't think it's. You can go to a low income person and say like, if they have a console, say they have access to an Xbox One or a
Mm.
PS4, and it's like just for $120 a year or something. Like it's a lot. It seems like a lot of money, but just spread all that out over time, where it's like 30 cents a day or whatever it would be, 40 cents a day. And it's like you have access to all of these games. How the hell that makes anyone money? It doesn't. And but that's not your problem. That's what I keep
No.
saying on the show. Certainly that's not your problem to worry about. So that it's interesting. It almost seems like its own style of propaganda, like counter propaganda, but it would be interesting to tell parents, like, if you can just see it through this long view lens, then you can have this Netflix like subscription service. And I would recommend Game Pass over PlayStation Plus Extra or Premium, just because of the first party exclusives, coming day and date. It's a lot of value there, you know?
Yeah,
Dude, and then people, Starfield is $70. It's what, $15 a month to be on Game Pass. And people paid $30 for 5 days early access to rent it. So people are just wasting money, like left and right and center. They don't even
yeah.
think about it. You paid $30 to have the ability to rent your game 5 days early. That shit
From what
pisses me
I've
off.
seen, a lot of people paid that $30.
Yeah, potentially millions, I would assume.
Yeah,
So, which is more power to Microsoft. That's great. It makes me sad. And then of course I'm gonna have to come up with I'm gonna be met with the conundrum one day when a game I really care about, right, has that. It hasn't happened yet.
yeah.
So what are the different kinds of things that parents come to you and kind of seek counsel about? I assume you're a very valuable conduit between worlds for them, or you would be if they were willing to seek it out.
I hope so. Yeah, if they feel the gaming is an issue, it is just I guess a point of um just confusion. Just like I don't know what they're doing with these games. I don't understand it. I don't know what to do. Like they're on their computer until 3 in the morning and they're not sleeping and they're lashing out at me and little things like that. And if I offer some pretty what I feel can be some pretty basic things where if it is like a very like young person, let's say 12 to 16, they still are in school, and obviously let's see if we can like set some boundaries, and even things of like going to your modem settings and putting in some parental stuff there, so maybe they don't necessarily have internet access after a certain time. And then I'll work with I don't know this young person, I guess, see what they get out of the game. I think that's important because a lot of it is social interaction through like Discord with their friends and stuff like that as well. So um, if they like doing that, I just try and I guess find something similar and might be a bit more, I guess, healthier, because the thing I try to push is I don't want to kick them off if that's the only thing they like doing, cool. But what's the balance? Like balance is key. Like when I listen to you and Cog talking about that sort of physical health, you look at like earning your gaming time. I try and come from a similar perspective where it's like we need to have balance. Balance is important with this thing because it can have real long-term detriments as well.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I was going to ask you about next was that balance, or like how I guess people, both kids, we don't have many we shouldn't have many young listeners, hopefully. But adults too, I think struggle with this. And I totally relate, although I'm so phone addled at this point, like broken. And I reflected on this on the episode of Constellation that goes live this week, actually, that, and I've said this before, that I've just been I used to be mega focused. Like you don't do things like I used to do and not have some sort of obsessiveness. Right. And, that's all gone now. I mean, it's not like, and it's just based on being bombarded with all these different options and things. And I'm not bored anymore. I don't want to be bored. I'm afraid of being bored. I can only imagine what it's like being a kid, like an unformed mind. At least I was old enough to live in a world without the internet. But when I was 12 or 13 and things really started popping off, I was kind of a little bit developed at that point. So I think it's somewhat difficult. But where do you find that balance, and what does that balance look like? Because I imagine I had no balance when I was a kid, but I also did really well in school, or well enough at times, but very well sometimes. And I played sports and did other things. So I was obsessed with video games, but I made sure to do other things. Do you think kids should be exposed to or not exposed to games based on how well they take care of the things around them? Because I certainly think that that's true for adults. Like if you're not catering to your wife, or you're not going to work, or you're like all tired, you got to get that shit together. You can't be playing games. And yeah, I try to earn my stuff every day. I was watching NFL football yesterday and I fell asleep during the second game because I was so tired, the Patriots Eagles game, and I slept through my workout period and I felt like a schlub, dude. You know, like I hate doing that stuff. So I have to work out every day before I play a game, or I just feel bad about myself. But that's kind of how I position it. I wonder how you think the balance should go.
Yeah, I think the balance definitely depends on the person. And it's funny that you mentioned it. I did see the notification came in early before we started the Constellation episode. And I'm very much looking forward to the social media usage and the best gaming controller conversation.
Oh yeah, that one got it. I got that. Yeah, those are good weird topics, but yeah, we get deep and personal in those because I'm a broken, shattered mind at this point, dude. Like I really am. I totally admit it. I know the way I used to be, and I'm not that way anymore, and it sucks. You know, I can't do anything without being, what's going on? I'm fucking like it matters. I don't know, man. So I can only, I mean, I try to be a little patient with young people because if I was 10 years old and this stuff was all I knew, I'd be gone.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I myself I know you've mentioned it before, but I myself have been I've been diagnosed with, was it adult onset ADD? And I don't know if that was always the case or if it's something that developed, because I used to be so engrossed in like my phone and stuff. I've really distanced myself from social media now because I guess I'm privileged enough to be able to do that. Like just nothing really anymore except for essentially YouTube, but I don't get on the comments or anything like that. I just have it for podcasts and things like that now. But it's, as far as that balance, it depends, because I know a famous theory by what's her name, Maria Montessori, about if the children are like sponges and they just absorb everything as they grow older. And that, I always found that was an interesting perspective in terms of, I guess, this type of, I guess, what you call like modern development. It's so engrossed in like technology, and I like to say with the balance is just like make sure that you want to play games, that's fine. And this is sort of like the minimum standard for me. It's like you want to play games, that's fine, as long as it's not affecting your functioning in your daily life. Like let's at least start there and build from there. Because I know a lot of the cases it is affecting their functioning in their daily life. So it's sort of, let's focus around like, are you looking after yourself? Are you keeping up hygienically with things? Are you eating appropriate food, like at appropriate times? Because a lot of the things, and this is something that I actually learned from you, was I do, was it intermittent fasting? I know you do the 1 meal a day. I can't quite do that, but I've recently, in the last 4 months, started intermittent fasting, where I eat from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I swear I've lost about, I don't know the amount in American, but I've lost 20 kilos, which
that's
is
I think that's quite a bit, I think, right?
Yeah.
Let's see, 20 kilos in pounds.
Yeah,
Who
45
knows why we have
pounds.
to measure everything so weird? It's 44 pounds, dude. That's
Yeah,
great.
and and it's
Congratulations.
literally, thank you, thank you. And it's literally just what I call like, I don't know, food weight. Like I do it so I don't have to really adjust my eating habits as much. I still eat
Right.
what I want, but I
Right.
make sure I get my nutrition in that period. And it's just, yeah, it's just come off, and I'm just like, Jesus, like food is such a just food by itself is such a insane indicator of, health and like weight and stuff like that. It's
Dude,
crazy.
it's true though. The people think it's like one meal a day is crazy, and I agree. I wish I didn't have to do that, but the reality is that I simply don't know how to eat human portions. I don't like
Mm,
it's weird to me to be like, I'm going to make one sandwich and I'm going to have a handful of potato chips. Like what? I don't know that world at all. I'm going to have 4 sandwiches. But the thing is that, so what I try to do is say like, you only can do so. It's what you're kind of speaking to. You can only do so much damage to yourself if you limit. You can still do a lot of damage to yourself, but you can only do so much if you say like, I am not eating except for in this period of time, and then you just kind of go ham if you want to. You're still not, at least from my experience, you're just not doing as much damage because I'm not for 21 hours or whatever. I'm simply not absorbing calories. So I think and I know that I would still, I would basically do if I ate at other times of the day, even though I'm really not hungry. Like I'm not hungry right now. I haven't eaten in probably, I don't know, 14 hours at this point, 15
mm.
hours. It's, but even if I was, I would just gorge myself. So you have to have like I don't know, man. I really highly recommend intermittent fasting to people, even if like you say you just do it. Most people do it 8:16, right?
Yeah.
I do it more like 3:21.
Mm.
So yeah, highly recommended. Congratulations, man. That's a lot of weight loss. 44 pounds is not a small amount of weight, and that's easy to put on and much harder to take off. So good for you.
No, thank you. But yeah, so that's sort of the thing where it could be even a similar thing with like young people, going back to that sort of gaming side of it, where if you're just making sure that your well-being is there, and you have a lot of stuff is sort of, I'm not, when I talk to young people, particularly in that sort of counseling space where it's sort of the one-on-one, I'd go like, look, let's just upkeep the lifestyle skills. Let's just making sure we're getting a good enough sleep. I really am a big, big, big proponent of sleep hygiene, because I think sleep is really important at times. I don't necessarily say how well my sleep is generally, but I often just say like, look, it is important that maybe you have some space from maybe a screen. If you have like things like, if you have a computer in your room, maybe not having it in your room, having like the bedroom as a place to sleep, like sort of tricking your brain. Because I often say like, I hate the human brain. I think it's one of the most flawed like things, where it's so susceptible to addiction and like little like, hey, what's that? Hey, what's that? And you sort of have to train it, and it takes effort to train it and get in routines and stuff like that.
Well, I like what I can't remember that guy Yal Harvari or whatever his name is, the Israeli anthropologist, wrote a book, and he was saying one of the things interesting about the human brain is it's the same as it was 500,000 years ago, like
Yeah.
indistinguishably the same. And it like there's nothing different about us fundamentally as far as nurture is concerned than they were coming out of the womb in caves when they were Cro-Magnon or whatever. And that's the thing I find so interesting. Of course we're broken. We have
Mm.
no idea what the hell we're doing. We're going to space, right? Like we're burning fossil fuels of old animals. We're clear cutting forests and going to the bottom of the ocean. And it's like, well, I don't know, man. These people would be fucking horrified if they. I always use, from, because I'm very American, of course. I always use Benjamin Franklin as my example, with like someone very intellectual and who knew, like, saw things ahead of time and like
Mm.
kind of knew where things were going. And be like, look at what we do now, and they would be mortified. They'd be like, what the hell happened? Like this fucking huge iron dome planes coming over, and like it's, and we're just, you could put us back in that time and we would fit right in some way with them too, like intellectually. And I
Yeah.
find that, so again, like I consider myself somewhat smart and mentally strong, and I'm an adult, and I bend and break to this stuff. So again, I feel bad for kids today, because it's just, there seems to be, I mean, it's very old person, but it's like, it feels like there's no innocence, you know?
Yeah, I get that old person mentality. And the thing is, as well, is that I think that's going to increase, because like, I don't know, like I've never seen technology like evolve so rapidly. Like I remember when the first iPhone came out, when I was 18, I think, when the first iPhone came out. Like this is like a game changer, and that feels like a millennia ago compared to what's out now. And now with and this is probably maybe a conversation for a different day, but with AI now and the way that's rapidly evolving at like insane speeds, like I've never like it's so crazy to see how rapidly technology is evolving. And I don't know if the human brain's like ready for that like rapid evolvement. Like I can't imagine it would be, but I don't know, what the future brings with all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think we live in kind of these unique times. I mean, think about the way you and I are talking right now. And, how long did it take James Cook to tell the home base that he had sailed to New Zealand or Australia back in the day? 6 months, probably. And you and I are at the speed of light, speaking English.
It
So
just reminds me of
yeah.
you and Jackie, having that conversation about the newscast, isn't it? That like delay when they're talking over the news. Yeah, it's just like we're talking almost seamlessly. Like I don't understand their technology.
It's so obnoxious. I listen to what we call in the States the Sunday shows every week, and I don't know what. I hate TV. I hate it. Like television, terrestrial television. I hate it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you and I are on the same page in this regard, and I really try to think of young people in this regard too, because I've talked a lot about, and again on that episode of Constellation, people will hear I talk a lot about wisdom and how, as I've gotten older, I just have come to realize and understand things to the point where, and I will continue to, no doubt, to the point where I don't even understand what I didn't understand back then. And so imagine having, and that just comes from experience. So imagine being 10 years old and just, I feel at 38 years old, I kind of grew up perfectly in the sense that I dodged. It's like they say you shouldn't, when you're like 15, go ahead and be an alcoholic when you're an adult, and that will do some damage. But if you become an alcoholic when you're a teenager, you'll do all of that formative damage and mess your brain up, and weed and all that kind of stuff. I feel like I kind of just escaped, right? Because I got my first cell phone, like a brick cell phone, when I was a senior in high school. And the iPhone came out the year I graduated college. So it's like I kind of escaped and got in at almost the perfect time. I think when we look backwards, we'll be like, yeah, people born probably between 1970 and 1990 had the last analog experience. And now we're dealing with kids that are that are indistinguishable from us mentally, but are dealing with like the Times Square bombardment, like, and
oh my God,
that's horrifying.
Smartphones in schools are something else sometimes. I remember hearing things just like, you hear young people and they say like, oh, we were in class and, I was doing work and someone took a picture of me and they uploaded it to Instagram and it was an unflattering pose. Now everyone's seeing it. I'm just like, for fuck's sake. And they're doing a thing where I live my state's called Queensland, and they're working on trying to ban smartphones and smart wearables starting term one next year. And I'm like, I don't know how you would implement that. I often joke where I said, I imagine young people, they are, instead of like going to the bathroom and having a quick smoke, they'll go to their bathroom and like quickly scroll Instagram.
Oh yeah.
And like, oh, look at that. And then quickly put the phone away and go back to class.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's totally, in some ways, better, obviously physically, way worse mentally. And I would love something, dude. I'm like kind of praying to the point where like, let's just get the Chinese invasion of the United States over with. Let's get these EMPs exploding, just mess all this shit up and let's get it over. So we won't have to even worry about it anymore. Cause I think you brought it up earlier with the bedroom and like TVs and phones. I know that you're right. And I have so little self-control as an adult, like a formative adult, right? Where I went a few days, I don't know, earlier this year where I'm like, I'm going to leave my phone downstairs and I'm going to go upstairs and go to bed. And I know for a goddamn fact I slept better those days because I didn't get up to go to the bathroom at 5 a.m. and then get back into bed and be like, well, guess I'll be on my phone for 45 minutes before I go back to bed for some reason, and then like biphasically sleeping like it's the 17th century. So yeah, so I don't know, man. I love this conversation. So let's end it on this because we have a big Australian audience. I would say
really?
It's our third biggest audience. Yeah, US, and then I would say UK, and then I would say Australia would be 3, and then Canada probably be 4, and non-English speaking places from New Zealand, of course, and other places. The Five Eyes, let's call them. But if people are in Australia, and again, I looked up Headspace and I read about it. Where can people find these sorts of resources to help them either individually or with their children? Like, where would you direct people, or maybe even more generally, if you have any? I know there's a lot of people have been recommending me this interesting book about breaking your addiction to social media and all these kinds of things too. So there's probably a lot of things that cross boundary, international boundaries. But for Australians specifically, where can they find more information on this?
So there is quite a few. If you feel you do want some support, there are obviously a lot of headspaces around Australia. There are also, the thing I always say, if you feel like you need some type of intervention, like go to your GP, your doctor, about that. As far as like, there is a lot of online support as well for young people. Things like, was it Kids Helpline, Beyond Blue, Headspace has an online service called eHeadspace. It's really just about, I guess, if you want that support, you really just have to, have a look around what's in your area, especially if you want that physical, like face-to-face support. And I always think your doctor's the best place to go with that. But, it's really a case of, just like I know with young people, they come in, and that's the thing we're talking about with growing up and being away from that. And when I was younger, I was very similar, where I was always said, well, I grew up and when I was 18, I drank a lot, and man, like I'm very open with this with young people as well if they ask. I said like I was what we call a massive stoner. I was smoking weed all the time, and I had to sort of break out of that myself. And I always say if young people come in or they want support, and they say I don't know where to go, I'm just like you're a real benefit is that you're asking. You're asking about it. You want help. Like when I was 16, I wouldn't have thought that I could go and get support for something like this, something I didn't even know maybe I was experiencing. But yeah, and it never hurts to have a conversation. Like if you're not sure, with if you're able to, obviously, with family, or if you don't feel comfortable, maybe like someone at school, like either a school counselor or a guidance officer, because they're well versed in, well, they should be well versed in, maybe referring you out to a organization that might be able to offer support as well.
Yeah. I don't think half of the kids in the United States can even read at this point, so let's not make any assumptions about what's going on in these schools. But yeah, this is very sound advice, and I love what you said about kind of acknowledging the problem by just cursorily seeking if there could be a solution. I think is a major first step. And I totally understand what you're saying. Like, I'd like to break myself of certain things too. Like, I'm still a stoner to this day, but I do that for, like, I just feel like I am so anxious all the time, and I'd rather medicate myself with that than with pills. But really what I need to do is to just probably get away from everything and see the light again and all of that. But I don't have that kind of strength right now. I really respect people that have the strength to identify their problems, like their foibles, and get help. And the younger, the better. I mean, the younger, the more impressive in some sense. Yeah,
for sure.
So,
yeah, especially if they, as you said, especially if they don't know it, there's like something's going on, and then we sort of just talk about it. And the key sort of thing of my work with them is that how can I help them find the answer themselves? And when you do, it is a real, like, I know what you call it, maybe like a gratifying moment when you look at it and you're like, you did that yourself. Like we talked about it, and but you should take credit in seeking support and finding the answer and putting yourself out there, because it takes a lot of strength to do that.
and for God's sakes, if you're going to get addicted to video games, can you at least get addicted to some good ones?
Please, yeah.
I mean, so there's a difference between being addicted to Final Fantasy 16 and being addicted to Fortnite, in my opinion. But no, it's wonderful that you're doing this. I give, I find kids personally somewhat intimidating, and I think a lot of people do. That's why I always give a lot of credit. I have a lot of teachers in my family, and it's like, damn, dude, I just being in the firing line and not knowing what you're going to get, and dealing with these young minds that don't really know the world yet, but think they do. And I don't know, when you reach those teen years, I don't think you're any more confident than ever. I don't think I was more confident ever than 16 years old when I knew everything. And so dealing with that youth is intimidating and difficult, but I really think it's great. And I appreciate that you took the time to talk to me about this today. I think this will be a good half of what I want to be the mental health and physical health yin and yang to deliver to everyone based on, as you said, the Cog episode that I did of Sacred Symbols Plus, health as well. And I think that people need to, and I love what you say too about, again, just seeking the help. Like, I feel like people just need to hear it sometimes, like to know that these sometimes intrusive thoughts or whatever, random things that they think about themselves, like maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe you aren't exercising enough. Maybe you are overeating. Maybe you should stop smoking cigarettes. Maybe you need to go to the doctor or the dentist or it's like sometimes you just need a push. And so hopefully this will provide a push for people as well, or a push for them to deal with their children as they get them re-addicted to a different, better video game than Genshin Impact.
Well, yes, I know. I feel like I've bashed Genshin Impact a bit here, but yeah, it is very much. I would very much agree with that. Where it's like I often say, I don't think I've ever met anyone who's had like intrusive thoughts like that. But the key thing is if that you want to support them. And yeah, I don't think I haven't talked about it too much, but I probably should give a shout out. But some of the games that Nintendo are making, like as far as that, like accessible to young people and fun for older kids as well, like so good, like Mario Kart, Super Smash, stuff like that. So it's so accessible, and it like the Switches I have are such the key point of entry to my group for young people to come in and have fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, Nintendo has long and successfully threaded that needle, I think.
Yeah.
Making, timelessness, agelessness. Yeah, I can see that would be more useful than playing Uncharted 4 or something like that.
Yeah, I can't exactly play The Last of Us with a group of 12-year-olds.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work. All right, Michael, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today, all the way from Australia. Are you going to go to bed now, or what are you going to do to stay awake?
My daughter will be awake in a couple of hours, so I'm actually gonna jump on Sea of Stars.
Cool.
I just got my 140th platinum yesterday played High on Life, so I just started Sea of Stars, and I think I'm hooked on it. Like it's really cool.
Yeah, it's great. I'm about 6 or 7 hours in myself. I haven't gotten to it as much as I wanted to because I've football season is now on, so it's cutting into my time. But also, I've been playing Halo 3 for knockback, so I got to get back to it. But you're nipping on my heels, 140 plat. I think I'm 146 or 45 or something. So you're nipping at my heels right now.
I hope people don't comment about all my talk about mental health and then me talking about my 140th platinum.
Dude, I find personal tranquility in the trophy hunt. I know that there's people judge it and they don't understand, and that's totally fine. But I find a feeling of personal tranquility, personal achievement, and peace, I guess. Like I like focusing on things and feeling like I'm getting something done and starting from the beginning and getting to the end and seeing the number grow and all that. That's very satisfying to me. Not unlike a lot of the things we were talking about it's prime gamification. I mean, it's not even, and you can't even call it anything else,
Yeah,
so
agreed.
So I totally understand. So I don't want to hear from the haters. The haters, keep it to yourself. I don't want to hear it. All right, my friend. Well, thank you for being on, Michael. Be well over there.
Thank you.
Remember, when you flush the toilet, it goes the other way when you come to the United States. I still don't know why that is. It has something to do with the planet and the pitch of the earth or something. I don't know what's going on with that. And you're in Australia, so you're not too close, but you're closer to Dustin than I am right now because he's in Japan. So you might feel a little more Dustin energy than usual as he's in Asia now.
I can feel the weeb energy.
The emanations from Kyoto or wherever the hell he is right now. All right,
we both happen to love One Piece, so I can feel it.
Yeah, he really does love it. That's just too much. There's nothing I love in the world that I would watch 900 episodes of. So I cannot relate. But teach their own, my friend. All right, thank you for taking the time. Be well. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I know you guys said you wanted more of an exploration of the things Cog and I discussed on that episode, which was so much better received than I had imagined. So I hope this episode and the next one will be to your liking. Of course, give us your feedback, and see you next time. Till then, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.